Well, I think when students look ahead to doing a dissertation, and perhaps when they first start it, the word limit looks like this very frightening, huge thing. How on earth will I ever write this much about this topic? And then about 3/4 of the way through, they think, how on earth can I write this little about this topic? Because I've done all this work, I've got all these stacks of notes or materials or interview schedules or whatever I've got. How on earth am I going to get them in here?
So often there will be an introduction to write, a literature review, a methodology chapter, findings, conclusions, bibliographies, appendices, and so on and so forth. And I think one of the problems that students often have is actually conceptualizing the amount of time that each portion of the dissertation will take to produce. So one of the things that I try to do with students is actually produce a timeline in which they can work towards.
And the best way to do a timeline is to start from the day that the dissertation is due and work your way backwards, not work forwards. And what it does is it gets you to start realizing when you need to have drafts completed, when you need to have if you're doing primary or secondary research, when you need to have that completed, when you need to have done all of the reading that you have, and it moves you backwards. And especially when you're working with a supervisor and you're looking for the supervisor to provide you with guidance and support in relation to draft chapters that you're doing, it's very important that you give time for that supervisor to look at the work that you're doing. So you need to put that into your timeline. So if your dissertation is due on the 29th of April, you can't finish the dissertation on the 20th of April and expect your dissertation supervisor to be able to glance through it and give you feedback. You should have it done the month before. You should have chapters done 2-3 weeks before you want them finished, so that you can then give them to the supervisor to maybe glance at or look at, depending on what your relationship is with them, and have them give you some feedback that then you can work on.
And that actually makes a dissertation much more manageable, because you haven't got to then kind of have a great theme, have a great set of conclusions simultaneously with finding bits of evidence or finding bits of crucial literature search and so on. You can divide it into chunks. It's probably good at an early stage to have a very schematic chapter outline, set of chapters, because it means that some of those chapters will be doing quite different jobs from others. And that means you can get some of them under your belt, that the student can actually do the core literature search in one chunk, or can do a core piece of methodological work in another chunk. In another chunk again, you can reflect on your choice of methodology or your choice of research question, because that will be an important chunk. So I think a role of the supervisor is to encourage the student to break it up, to break the task up into manageable pieces, and to take a different approach, and to step through them systematically. Perhaps it's not so much like eating an elephant as planning a house, building a house.
You need to write something down in order to determine whether it's relevant. So sometimes you will write something, and at the end of the day, you will not use it at all. But that actually is a very important part of the process, is recognizing what you don't need to say, because it's not relevant or it's not necessary.
And bear in mind that what you write at the start won't be used in the final dissertation. It might not be particularly good, but just get into the practice of writing, revising, screwing up bits of paper, throwing away floppy disks, not smashing computer screens, but in all seriousness, just start writing and use that as a vehicle of exploring different ideas, exploring the limitations of what you're doing, the strengths of what you're doing, and just look at it as a process where you're constantly revising up until, of course, the final draft stage, where you do have to eventually say, enough's enough, this is it, this is the final version. But just get writing and keep writing and revising.
That you'll say, right, this is the bit where I give my literature review. I'm going to give myself a target of 3,000 words, 2,000 words, whatever it is appropriate for your literature review. Now maybe your first crack at it will be longer than that and will be too wordy. You'll distill it, and in the process of distilling it, you'll tighten your argument and you'll tighten your understanding. But of course, there's an assumption in there. There's an assumption that you have the luxury of time and organisation to do more than one draft of your different sections. If you don't give yourself that time, you're in trouble, because the thing becomes less manageable. If you do give yourself time, you will have the satisfaction of producing something really good, because you'll have distilled it, you'll have tightened it up, and you'll have got it within the word limit.